right, I'd like to call this public hearing to order. The purpose of the hearing is to consider the proposed tax increment financing of District 2 redevelopment project area plans and projects. Clerk, please call the roll.
Marevka? Here. Jones?
Here.
March?
Here.
Parker?
Here.
Ham?
Here.
Bowden?
Here. And first we need to acknowledge publication of the public hearing notice. Jim, do you want to, is there anything special we have to do with that?
No, the copy of public notice is included within your packet, and it was published on, let's see, the third publication date. In any case, it was published in accordance with the law, calling for the public hearing tonight, August 12th, at Peotone at 5:30 p.m.
Okay. And like I said, the purpose of this hearing is to consider the proposed tax increment financing District 2 redevelopment project area plan and project. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Steve, if you'd like to just give us a brief overview before we have our public comment.
Thank you, Trustee March. I will take just a couple of minutes and provide you a little background on the proposal tonight. And just by way of timeline, just so we're all on the same page, the village really engaged this process in April of this year. On April the 8th, my company, the Economic Development Group, along with Jacob & Klein, an economic development law firm, our companion firm, was engaged by the village to undertake a process to begin looking at an area for the proposed TIF District Number 2. We've got a sign-in sheet on a clipboard somewhere. I'm not sure where it ended up. There is a separate sign-in for the public hearing. If we could pass that around, please. So we really began this process in April with the village. We submitted a draft redevelopment plan on June the 14th. It was subsequently revised slightly on July the 16th, so you should all have the most current version available to you. And the publications that appeared in the newspaper were quite lengthy. They included an announcement for the public hearing as well as a summary of the plan, a copy of which I provided to everyone tonight, along with the legal description, a boundary description for the area, and a copy of the map. It was all published in the newspaper. It was published twice, once on July the 25th and again on August the 1st. We are here tonight for the public hearing, and the earliest that the village will have ordinances, the board will have ordinances presented to it for actually establishing the TIF district won't be any earlier than August the 26th of this year. Okay, so that's kind of our timeline outline for this process. A copy of the map is provided to you on the inside of this piece that I handed out to everyone, and there's extras here if you need more. I don't know if anyone else back there might. There are only 5 vacant parcels that are included in this redevelopment project area. When we do mailings, when the statute requires notices be given by mail, certified mail, to taxpayers of record for parcels that are within a proposed TIF district area. Otherwise, there's a separate notice that is mailed by regular mail to residential addresses that are within 750 feet of the proposed area. And beyond that, then the publication in the newspaper essentially, by that time, I think just about everyone has become aware of the invitation to attend. Of the 5 vacant parcels, and you're all familiar, I think, with where we're talking about, is at the intersection of 88th Avenue and the Wilmington Peotone Road. Of those 5 parcels, the TIF Act requires that the village make findings as to the qualification of the area, of the land, to be qualified to be included within a TIF district. And those qualifications, which are documented in the redevelopment plan, include chronic flooding and the fact that these parcels, these properties contribute to flooding in adjacent properties and other areas within the same watershed. Evidence of blighted conditions are found on some of the property, most notably on that corner piece that's on the immediately there on the corner of 88th and Peotone Road, where there was a restaurant or some other facility at one time. The post for the sign and the concrete is evident there. That's the type of thing that constitutes blighted conditions before becoming vacant. There are some properties that are adjacent to these vacant tracts that their structures, their buildings exhibit some deterioration. So deterioration of adjacent properties is found there. And then, of course, the static growth, the fairly flat history of the assessed valuation on these properties also contributes toward the qualifications of the area. So the poor drainage, the flooding that you all saw when we had the heavy rains in April and May in the spring there is the primary qualifier for all 5 of these properties. The Act only requires that to be present for these properties to qualify under the Act for inclusion in a TIF district. Now, within the plan, there are anticipated public project costs, projects and related project costs, and then there's a section that talks about anticipated types of private TIF redevelopment projects. And the public projects include all of the typical kinds of public infrastructure, such as roads, water, sanitary, storm. We make provisions for those things in the plan. We understand that the village has sold its water and sewer to a private company. This is a plan that spans a 20-year period, so there are some allowances for sewer and water still within the plan that for some reason the village might need to incur at some point, but beyond that there's really an array of different types of public costs that the village might incur at some point that totals about $33,900,000. Now, this is not a commitment. It doesn't obligate the village to incur those costs, but we're trying to anticipate, based upon the type of development that may be likely to occur on this amount of area that's included in the TIF district, how much infrastructure might be required in order to rectify the drainage as well as install roads and other curbs, gutters, sidewalks, and so forth that would be needed in order to see those areas fully developed. In an ideal world, we'd like to see the private sector incur those expenses, and then the village would use tax increment financing dollars that are resulting from the increased assessed values that occur when something new gets built. The village could benefit from the increased tax that's generated from that new growth to reimburse a private developer for those expenses. That would be preferred. But over a long period of time, the plan really needs to be able to accommodate and account for the possibility that the village may actually incur some of those costs, but then still have the same ability to recover them from the increment in future years. Of the types of private redevelopment project costs, we've included primarily commercial, retail, light industrial types of developments that would be anticipated on these 5 tracts, on these 5 properties. We are not anticipating that you're going to be having proposals for residential development on the other side of the interstate or immediately adjacent to the interstate in these areas. And so the village's direction, and to our best of our knowledge, your desire is to see commercial, light industrial development occur around this interstate interchange. Those private projects, in order to fill that area up, and based on experience that we've seen in numerous other similar kinds of TIF district configurations, we are estimating that you could have somewhere in the neighborhood of $84 million worth of new private investment occur within that area over the full length or life of the TIF district. The projects that we've identified, the types of projects, whether they be a hotel, they might be a travel plaza, they might be some type of a small, light industrial manufacturer, or it could be a warehousing type situation. We anticipate that they would likely incur, of that $84 million investment, you might see as much as $20 to $25 million of TIF eligible expenses that could be incurred. And those would be potentially reimbursable through the TIF program, provided the village on a case-by-case, project-by-project approves a written redevelopment agreement by ordinance by this board, approving the terms and the conditions for how those reimbursements would occur. So again, the plan does not commit or obligate the village to pay anyone anything. What the plan is a comprehensive review of what the village would hope, the best case scenario, what could happen in this area if all of these projects were to occur. That's what these numbers would reflect. And of course, we know over that long of a period of time, it isn't going to go exactly the way that it's outlined, but this plan, it gives the flavor for what the village is hoping to accomplish with regard to redevelopment goals out in that area. There is one inducement resolution that's been approved for the private projects, which you're all aware of, is the proposed travel plaza, truck plaza, and hotel. This is, as of our last information that we had received from the developer, it's looking like it would be about a $13 to $14 million project that's being proposed to be undertaken. They're on the corner of 88th and would be on the north side of 88 and Peotone Road, the northeast corner, right?
West.
Northwest. I always get turned around when I'm over here for some reason.
Well,
And-
northeast corner of 88 at Wilmington
It is the
Road.
northeast.
Northwest corner of I-57.
Here, I'll point to it,
Yeah.
right here.
There you go.
Okay, so that's where the first project that's been proposed for this area has been a point of discussion for some time, and the village approved what's called an inducement resolution for that project on May the 28th of 2019. Again, that was non-binding. It did not obligate the village to reimburse anything. It didn't obligate the developer even to proceed with the project, but the inducement resolution was approved for the point of making it known that the village was engaging in that discussion, that there was a project pending, and that there could be costs that would begin to be incurred from that date going forward that later on could potentially be considered TIF-eligible expenses that could be reimbursed through an agreement at some point in time. The annexation of that property, along with an annexation agreement, was approved, my understanding is last week on August the 5th. And as I mentioned earlier, a TIF redevelopment agreement is still in negotiation, is yet to be determined as of today. The public projects, I will note also that of the $33,900,000 of potential public projects, there's a line item in that list as well for addressing future needs, if any, of the other taxing bodies that could be or may be impacted by any of these projects that are undertaken in that area. Project hasn't occurred yet. There are likely to be commercial industrial projects. They may affect other taxing bodies differently. We've had discussions with both the school district and the fire district in particular, so if there are documented additional fire calls or emergency rescue calls out there, or hazmat type incidences, that somehow cause an increase in costs on the fire district, for example. The village, given the language that's included in the TIF plan, as well as what the TIF Act provides, has the authority and the ability to work with the other taxing bodies at any point during the life of this TIF district. So, I think I'll let you know. I have with me tonight too Herb Klein. Our last names are both Klein. They're spelled differently. So Herb's not my brother, but he is an attorney in our firm, and he's joined me tonight for the discussion.
My brother and his attorney.
Yeah, he's my
Nice to meet everyone that I haven't met before. On the legal side of it, I'm the attorney, and Jacob and Klein, one of the attorneys, and Steve is president of the Economic Development Group, does all the planning. So we kind of do the legal side, he does the planning side. But no, he gave a good summary of everything. The only thing I want to reinforce is, as Steve mentioned, TIF plans are typically 23-year plans. The TIF Act recognizes that. It gives you the ability to amend the plan over time, because as much planning and foresight and forethought goes into these plans, nobody knows, construction costs could change, the developer's plans could change, when something is developed will affect it, taxing rates can change, the whole method of taxing could change. So there is flexibility built into the TIF statute, into the plan, that if things don't go exactly as are laid out in there, it's 23 years long, we come back and we amend it if we need to. But we try up front, and our firm has done quite a few of these, is to work with the village officials, work with the municipal officials, find out from the developer as much data as we can, glean as much data as we can from the county, from the assessor's office, to build what we think is a fair representation of what could happen, I think is the right way to say it. But with that, it's a public hearing. We should probably see what comments or questions people may have.
Before we do that, can you just explain briefly, so how the TIF district works? Sometimes there's confusion that, the tax, the business isn't going to be paying taxes or something like that, or somehow we're giving taxes back to the business. So just explain just basically what happens.
So within a tax increment financing district, every property owner pays their real estate taxes. There are not any automatic waivers or abatements of any kind. With tax increment financing, everyone pays their taxes. The idea is that when the TIF is established, Will County will certify for the village what the current equalized assessed value is. So your assessed value is what you're taxed on your property. Every piece of land that receives a real estate tax bill obviously has a market value. The county determines what it believes, somehow they ascertain what they believe the market value of a property is. For commercial property, the assessed value is typically about a third of that, about 33% of the market value. And that value multiplied by the total real estate tax rate that is applicable in any given year during the life of the TIF then is the total tax bill that a person will pay, except that of that total amount that is paid, if some portion of that assessed valuation is realized or occurs after the TIF is established and it's over and above what the original value was for the property, if there's an increase in the assessed valuation, then that portion of the assessed valuation over and above the initial value multiplied by the same tax rate merely reallocates a portion of the real estate tax bill to a special fund here at the village that is the special tax allocation TIF fund for TIF 2. And those funds are to be spent then within that TIF District 2 boundary during the life of the TIF district, or as it may be the case in the future at some point, if TIF District 2 is contiguous with another TIF district, there can be some transfers of TIF dollars between contiguous TIF districts, but right now it's all contained to these 5 properties. So when you see a real estate tax bill and your property is within a TIF district, you'll see the amount that you pay, And you can look at each of the taxing districts that will be listed on the tax bill, such as the village and the county and the township and the fire district and the library district and the school district and so forth. And each one of those districts that have the authority to levy a tax, you'll also go across and you'll see a real estate tax rate. And that rate is based on the amount of funds that have been levied or requested by each of the taxing districts and then is set by the county treasurer. When you get to the line that shows the Peotone TIF District number 2, it will have a dollar amount, but there's no rate because TIF districts are not a taxing body. They don't have the authority to levy a tax. So there's no new tax rate that occurs because of TIF. It is merely a reallocation of a portion of the total tax bill that the taxpayer is paying, but the part that goes to the TIF only relates to the improvements that have occurred since the TIF district was established. Okay, so it's over and above what the value is now. Anything that is built out there that increases the assessed value causes that tax bill to increase. That increased portion of the tax bill is what is temporarily captured by the village in the TIF fund during the life of the TIF district. And unless there are agreements, whether they be private redevelopment agreements or intergovernmental agreements with other taxing bodies, the money stays in the fund and the village would then use it for public projects anywhere within that TIF area. The only time that there would be money paid to anyone else would be privately through a written agreement approved by ordinance or to another taxing district by virtue of you having approved, the board having approved an intergovernmental agreement. Okay?
Thank you. So with that being said, we'll open it up to any public comment or questions. All I ask is that you state your name, speak into the microphone, keep it civil, try to keep it concise, and yeah, it's all yours. Anybody wants to speak? Okay, there's no public comment. No, go ahead.
I just have a question.
Yep, please.
My name is Amy Maxon. I had a question about the bill that Pritzker signed today that was stating that it's required to put on tax bills the amount of money that's going into the TIF for each individual person. I didn't understand it, and I was wanting to see if I could get some clarification on that.
Well, my understanding of this bill is that the counties that publish the real estate tax bills are now going to be required, all of them will be required to include the reallocation that is associated with the TIF district on each individual real estate tax bill. Not every county has done that in the past. I referred to that in my example because most counties do. Most counties, as I explained, you'll see all the list of the taxing districts, their rates, the amounts that are paid, and a line there that refers to the TIF district that that property resides in and the dollar amount that's reallocated to the TIF fund. But not every county has done that. The county assessors, county clerks, county treasurers actually have quite a lot of discretion from one county to the next as to how they have assessed and prepared their real estate tax bills. My understanding is that this is an effort to try to bring uniformity and standardize that process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They're requiring counties to list it now. Most counties we work with do, but there are some counties that don't, so now they have to show it.
Yeah.
So does that include, like, if I have, I have that on my tax bill, so nothing, so as an individual in the town, nothing is coming out from our bill going into the TIF?
Only if your property's in the TIF district, and only if your assessed value increases after your TIF.
I know you don't live there because these are all vacant.
Well, I live very close to it.
Yeah.
So if our property values go up after the TIF, and we don't live in it, then it affects us not at all, right?
you pay a higher tax probably unless the tax rates go down. But
And
it won't,
that
but
higher
it won't,
tax
and
goes
none of that money will go to the TIF, it'll go to all the taxing bodies and pick up your tax bill. Your taxes, your individual tax bill, we all pay the property tax bill if we own property, and none of us like paying it, is based on the tax rate of all the taxing bodies and the county determined assessed value of your property. So whatever your property is worth, the equalized assessed value of that, which is typically 1/3 of market value, times the tax rate, which is a compilation of the fire district, the school district, the county, the city, the municipality, township, determines your property tax bill, how much you pay. That's an exemption, like an owner's program type exemption, senior citizen, being in a TIF district or being next to a TIF district doesn't change how much you're going to pay in real estate taxes. If you're in a TIF district and your real estate taxes increase because maybe you built an addition onto your house, that increase in value goes to the TIF. But you're not in the TIF district.
That only happens here.
Steve, let me come at this another way. Currently, the land is vacant,
Yes.
so it pays very little real estate taxes. Now, let's say hypothetically somebody comes in and builds a business.
Yes.
That property now becomes more valuable,
Right.
and then the owner of that property will pay more real estate taxes. Correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Because of the investment that owner put into that
Because they
property.
built something.
And they're the only people who are going to pay the increased taxes.
The property owner.
The property owner who added on to, or turned it from vacant lots into a business, that business owner is going to pay those taxes.
Sure.
Living next door to it doesn't make a next door neighbor have to pay increased taxes unless their house goes up in value because of.
Now, if the travel plaza proceeds and constructs on the corner, and there isn't a house there on the corner, but if you lived across the road from that, I've never seen a county anywhere use a convenience store or a travel plaza as a comparable to raise a residential house assessment. Now, the overall value of the area over time might increase, which only means if you live near or adjacent to a area that's redeveloping, your property might be worth more if you decided you wanted to sell it. But it's a stretch to see cases where the county treasurer or the assessor is necessarily going to immediately increase the value of your home or your property by virtue of something being redeveloped next door. Over time, that might happen if a rising tide lifts all boats and the area increases in value. But there's not a direct cause and effect there because of the TIF being established.
So the only person who's going to pay the tax is the developer of that
Yes.
property. The residents are not subsidizing the
No.
tax bill of that
No.
property owner. No, there's no taxes going to residents because of establishment of a TIF.
No one has ever offered to pay my real estate tax. So every property has a bill. That property owner, whoever that person is or persons, are responsible for paying that bill.
Okay. And because that person is putting investment in the community, there's a benefit to the community in increased real estate taxes paid for
Yes.
by the developer.
Increased real estate taxes, increased sales tax if it's commercial business, increased jobs, construction jobs, plus permanent jobs, greater activity, which theoretically will help the other businesses in town. And that's why the TIF allows the municipality to enter into a redevelopment agreement with that developer to offer some reimbursement of the taxes he's paying as an incentive to locate him in your community. So he's the one paying the tax, and it's up to you, gentlemen, how much of that you're willing to make available to him as an incentive. And ladies. Ladies and gentlemen.
And if there's no business, then he's still paying vacant land tax, which
Exactly.
is practically nothing.
Yeah, now, depending what he pays for the land, the county may raise the assessment and he'll pay greater tax. But if there's no development, I can't imagine the village is gonna reimburse him any increase in that taxes.
Okay. I think that's helpful.
Hi, my name is Sandy Barron.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
My name is Sandy Barron. I have two questions. So let's just cut to the chase here. As far as the traffic plaza would be settling in this. So for 23 years, they're paying taxes like everybody else would be, or they're not paying taxes?
They will be.
To the full extent that I am paying taxes on my house?
They'll be paying more tax than you pay on your house probably. but
That I
yes,
understand.
the same
Well-
process.
Would they be paying the full portion? Because then what is the TIF for?
There are no tax breaks. The TIF is in place because when the travel plaza, if it proceeds and it constructs the new buildings, the hotel and the truck stop area, that value of those buildings that are constructed on that property will increase the assessment. That will increase the tax bill on that property. That increased real estate tax that results because of those improvements then is available in the village TIF fund to be able to help pay for the road improvements, to help reimburse the cost of the site preparations, to help reimburse other TIF eligible costs that have helped make Peotone more competitive with other areas so as to put Peotone on more of a level playing field for areas that would also like to have projects like this.
But from day one, they're going to be paying the taxes.
Yes, ma'am. They will be responsible for paying
They're
their
not
own
going to
real
be
estate.
left out of anything.
No, there's no abatements, there's no breaks, there's no discount on their tax bill. Everyone pays the full freight on their real estate taxes within a TIF.
And are they paying for the land, or is Peotone giving it to them at a different rate? Are they paying for the land?
My understanding is that the Village of Peotone is going to help facilitate the acquisition of the land with the idea that the TIF increment will ultimately pay for and reimburse the cost of the land and the improvements, some of the improvements.
So what does Peotone get out of this whole thing?
It will receive, beyond the life of the TIF district, you'll have a sales tax generating company there that will generate revenue for the village long after the TIF is gone. The TIF district is in place to try to help facilitate getting the project here, to reimburse the cost to the extent that the developer is willing to make that investment here as opposed to doing it somewhere else.
And are they going to get 10% sales tax?
10%.
Well, that's what you have to pay. I mean, you're paying 10%.
The TIF doesn't
so-
affect sales tax at all. So it's just
So
going to
we'll be collecting whatever the sales tax is.
whatever the rate is.
I mean,
whatever
on
the rate is.
food, it's like 1%, 2%. That's nothing.
Yeah, it's whatever the rate is. So TIF doesn't affect the rate. What this will be is new sales tax that the village isn't otherwise getting because
Correct.
now it's vacant
Correct.
ground.
Correct.
But the rate is the rate.
And-
The TIF doesn't set the sales tax rate. We don't have any, TIF doesn't have any.
And the village can use the sales tax anywhere
I
within the
understand
village
that.
of Peotone.
I have a question, I'm sorry. I do have a question about it. So in other words, the TIF, what it does, okay, so if right now I'm paying $5,000 in taxes, and I live in the TIF district, and then next year it goes up to $7,000, that $2,000 is going to go into the TIF,
Yes.
and that's what gets spent?
Right.
Correct?
So,
Okay.
so if you look at this, and I don't remember offhand, it's in the plan. If this property, this vacant land out there is paying $1,000 in real estate taxes right now, just my example. And somebody builds a truck stop there, maybe a hotel, maybe a restaurant, and the county says, oh, that's great. You're now gonna pay $21,000 in real estate taxes because you've improved the value of your property. That $20,000, the difference between 1 and 21, comes back to the village, goes into the special fund, not their general fund. They can't use it to pay salaries. Goes into in essence, an economic development fund, the TIF fund. The village can then use that $20,000 to pay for what are, under the law, TIF eligible costs, which can be all the public infrastructure that's needed to accommodate that development. It can be to get the land under control. It can be to help with site work, engineering, infrastructure, utilities, so that the developer will come and locate it there so that for the next 23 years it won't continue to pay $1,000. It'll now pay $21,000. Then there are tangential benefits such as increased sales tax, increased employment opportunities, construction jobs, more economic activity in the village as a whole, so.
But none of that money will come back to the schools or anything like that.
Well, the schools will continue to get the money that they're getting off the land now, which is, in my example, the $1,000 tax bill, they're getting a percentage of that. Okay? They'll continue to get that. If nothing is built there, they'll always continue to get that. If something is built there during the life of the TIF, they will only share in that increase if at some point them and the village enter into an intergovernmental agreement. And as Steve mentioned, we built into the plan the flexibility to do that, just like we had a conversation with the fire district the other day. If they note an increase in calls out there and they need some special hazmat equipment or something because there's chemical spills with the trucks or something, and it's producing revenue, they can always come to the village and say, can you help us out, enter into an intergovernmental agreement, and the village can use some of that $20,000 in my example to pay for those costs.
I guess my biggest concern is what is going there and what crime will come from that. The truck stop, the hotel, it's not like anything, there will be crime. And is that something that we want to bring in?
You understand that the hearing tonight is about the establishment of a financing district. It's about the financing of these redevelopment projects.
I understand.
I'm not here to address the qualitative issues or concerns that you may have about that. I think
That
that's
is my
been
biggest
brought up
concern.
to the board, and I'm sure it will be again in the future, but our responsibility tonight is to discuss the qualification and the establishment of the TIF area that may include this project that's been discussed for some time now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's why we're here.
Okay. I'm trying to understand. Let me say my name again and everything.
Sure.
Okay.
We like to hear you.
I'm still. Okay, so with the truck stop, let's say, so he's coming in, he's building that, it's in the TIF, the schools, the fire, none of them get any part of that until, like we were just discussing.
Not
right?
automatically.
Oh, until the 23 years is up, right? Or
Unless there's an agreement made earlier.
Right, okay. But if they didn't do the TIF, and he built the truck stop, they would all get their portion of the 21,000 once the taxes increase.
Well, he's here. Ask him if he's going to do it without it.
But that's what I'm saying, I'm
So,
trying to
that's-
understand what's the.
That's why the village has that inducement resolution, because the idea behind the TIF is that you're using TIF to try to encourage something to happen that was not happening without it otherwise. And this project is, to the best of my knowledge, as it's been proposed, continues to be proposed, is contingent upon the availability of some assistance, which is yet to be fully defined, but some assistance through tax and financing.
That's what I'm trying, and you may have said it, and I'm just trying to put all the pieces
No,
together.
you're right. I mean,
You're
if-
exactly
if everyone was convinced that the project is gonna happen regardless, then there'd be no need to put it in.
Right,
the
so,
TIF
but when she was saying that they're still paying this, he's still paying the same amount of taxes, he's still paying, then what is the
No, he's still,
big draw for him,
he's-
for it to be a
he's paying
tip?
his taxes. There's no tax break, so when he increases the value of the property, he'll have
He'll
the
have
big
that.
tax bill.
Right,
The majority of that increase in the taxes will be received by the village in the TIF fund, which the village can then use that money to reimburse back to him
so
through
he's getting money reimbursed back to him.
through an agreement that has yet to be done, but through an agreement, he can be reimbursed for acquisition of land, the site preparation, all the leveling, the grading of the land, and preparing the site to build buildings on it. We don't use TIF. The statute does not allow the village to use TIF dollars to reimburse the vertical construction of a new commercial building. Okay? So he's not going to be reimbursed with TIF for any vertical construction of the hotel or the buildings themselves. Think of it in terms of the TIF is in place to make the ground available, make it ready to be able to build on, to prepare it to be built on. Those costs, by virtue of a written agreement that would be entered into at some point, can be reimbursed from the TIF fund to the developer if the developer verifies that he's incurred those expenses. And there's a whole process for that. They provide waivers of lien and invoices and paid receipts and canceled checks, and verified that they actually incurred these expenses for that project. And then, depending on the specific terms of an agreement that the village has agreed to over some period of time, it doesn't have to be the life of the TIF district, it might be a shorter time. It may be capped at some dollar amount, not to exceed cumulatively over some period of time. All of those details are yet to be figured out, but the money that is reimbursed has to be for an eligible cost. Statutory,
It's already pre-set up.
yes.
Why can't it be a shorter term? Why can't it be 5 years, 7 years? Why does it have to be 23 years?
That's a good question, and many times what has to happen is that the project gets built, this increase in the real estate tax bill occurs, but you're not going to be able to reimburse all of the developer's eligible expenses that induced him or her to bring the project here. You can't do that in 1 or 2 years or in 5 years. You may need 10, 15, maybe 18 years to be able to collect the tax each year and then reimburse some portion of that back to the developer on a pay-as-you-go basis until they've received some total cumulative number that the agreement provided.
The other issue is there's a lag too, always. You know, if you build something
Right.
in 2019, hopefully, and if it's done in 19, it'll get fully assessed in 2020, and it'll finally pay a tax bill in 2021. So depending on when something gets built and when it gets fully assessed and the practices of your local assessor, there's a 1.5 to 2.5 year lag before you collect the taxes on a newly built building. So people ask all the time, why does the TIF Act allow for 23-year TIF districts? 23 is an odd number, why did it pick 23? And the idea was when the TIF first came in 1986, is that 20 years is a common financing term, whether it's a bond or a bank loan. So if somebody's going to borrow money with the expectation that they're going to have this reimbursement, it's going to take them, if they start in year 1, 2 to 3 years to get the full 20 years of financing in place. So that's why they're 23-year TIFs. It may take 20, it may take 10, it may take 5. A lot of it's going to depend on how quickly the developer moves, what the final assessment is. Right now, we're working off numbers that he's estimating and that we've seen in other similar projects. Numbers could come in lower, they could come in higher, what the county's going to assess it.
I have one other question. So how come the village has never given a tip to anybody in the downtown area? Those businesses, why do they not get a tip?
So we do have a TIF district in place for the downtown. As I said, to get money from that TIF, you have to have an increase in assessed value. And that TIF district has only been in place for a couple of years, and there hasn't been
Last year.
any, what's that?
It was last year.
Just 1 year. There hasn't been any increase in assessed value there, so there's no money in that TIF right
Well,
now.
there's been a couple businesses that have come in, I mean, the style canine. Did she get a tip?
So,
Well, that's not fair.
Well,
You're giving a tip to
so
somebody
Now,
else
one
there.
thing that I would say, and we weren't involved in establishing TIF 1 for Peotone, but you could buy an older building in a downtown, whether it's Peotone or any other municipality in the state. You could buy an old building and move your business in there. And maybe you make some repairs, maybe you fix the leaky roof, maybe you put a new heater and an air conditioning unit in. That's not necessarily going to raise the assessed value. And actually, if the property's been empty for a while and you buy it for a lower price, it's probably going to have a lower assessed value. So it can be difficult and take longer to generate increment, which is the incentive that the village has to work with. It takes longer in a downtown, in a traditional older downtown, to create any money to offer an incentive or a reimbursement or a grant to somebody. Where if you build a new building, the county's pretty much going to assure that they're going to assess it at about 1/3 of what it costs you to build it. So you're going to get an instant hit of increment. I could take an old building and I can buy it for $75,000 or $100,000, and I might put $50,000 into it, fixing the roof or the heating and air conditioning or the windows, and the county's not going to raise my assessment to $50,000. So, because the
So-
building hasn't gone up in value that much.
So TIF district, the downtown TIF district was established in April of 2018. So it's not even, it's just over a year. We haven't even gotten through the first tax cycle after the TIF was established. So you're exactly right, there's not any money available in the fund at all yet. But the tonight's meeting is about TIF District 2 out by the interstate. We've also been engaged by the village to help them administer TIF District 1. It's just we haven't turned our attention to TIF District 1 just yet. We'll need to look at it to see what kinds of things we can do with TIF District 1 to try to encourage more of that type of thing to happen. If they've made improvements since that TIF district was established, it doesn't close the door, it doesn't foreclose their opportunity to benefit from the TIF yet, even later on when there's some funds available. But there will have to be some other kinds of innovative programs, whether they be matching grants, low interest loans, or some type of assistance that will have to be designed within that TIF District 1, this downtown area, to be able to do the kinds of things that Herb was talking about. Because on these older buildings, on their own, case by case, it's going to be very difficult for them to benefit a lot by the TIF district. They're going to need some supplemental help. And so we'll turn our attention to TIF 1 soon, but there will be some remedial things that perhaps we can help the village do to help make those opportunities more available.
So by establishing a TIF does not create a pot of money that people get to use.
It does not.
To invest in their buildings.
If in TIF District 2 that we're talking about tonight, if this first initial project doesn't happen, there's no money in the TIF fund.
So we establish a TIF, and Mr. Patel says, I'm not going to do this. We've established a TIF, but there'll be no money.
Until something develops there.
Until something develops.
Until something else develops. So that's in part.
Which is why in the downtown there's a TIF established for a year, but there's no money because nobody's come in and done a big.
Or there hasn't been any substantial increase in the assessed values of the properties that are already here, right? But again, you established it in April. So tax year 18 payable 19 is going to be your first year that you may be receiving any funds, which are not going to be very much on if there's any natural growth that occurs on these older properties. So we're going to need to find some creative ways to stimulate some type of new investment in the downtown that will help create some additional funds in your downtown TIF fund. And then once you've got some money in there, you could do some matching grants or some other types of assistance to these properties that can't do it on their own.
Yes?
Jeff Remo, I live in the Meadows. So will Patel's money in his TIF, will that be able to be used in the first TIF district downtown? Or does it have to stay in this?
Not at this
second
time.
TIF?
This TIF district is limited right now
those
to
five
these
parcels?
5 properties.
And it's not, so it can be used in the other 3? It doesn't have to be just spent in his 2 blocks?
That's correct. It can be anywhere within this TIF area.
Okay, so
Right.
the whole area. Yeah, is that why we're not just talking about TIF district for those 2 lots right now? Why do we make that such a big?
So the whole idea is to create money that the village can use as incentive for other projects to
Develop
come
that
in
other
that
area. All right.
And as
Well, I guess Eagle Lake's coming through with an exchange, are we gonna make that a TIF district then too?
Well, that's not in our
Jurisdiction.
jurisdiction. That's not.
It's in Peotone, Eagle Lake Road.
But it's not
Not in the
part of the
village.
village.
That's not part of the
Oh.
village right now. No, I mean,
So we won't
if
be able
we
to-
annex it, we could.
We
but
won't be
yeah.
able to TIF district that area? No.
Unless we
Property
somehow
has to be
annex
within the
it.
boundary of the city to include it in
Yeah.
TIF district.
Or it has to be annexed prior to the TIF being created.
When you look at a map, when you look at Peotone, it's Eagle Lake Road is Peotone, right?
It's got a Peotone address, but it's not inside the village of
It's
Peotone.
It's like unincorporated.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we can't-
Unincorporated
We can't
Peotone.
TIF district.
no, unless we annex
Unless we
it.
annex all the way up to that exit.
Yeah.
Which maybe we might.
Hopefully.
All right, any other questions?
I have one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this might be for you all and not him, I'm not sure. But he had mentioned that you were in discussions with the fire department about working out a deal with them if they needed extra, or, you know, they found out like hazmat equipment or things like that, that they could get money from the TIF. One of my concerns has been the school districts, because they're having financial issues, and they are wanting to do a referendum coming up. And is there any possibility, or are you in the works of some kind of deal with them so that they're getting some of what they need too, so they're not having to needing as much of a referendum or at all?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any, discussions or agreements. I know we've talked to the school about some of the issues that you brought up, but there's been no talk of any kind of a agreement or anything like that.
What we have discussed with the school district a couple of times is that the way this area is configured, and the plan is really designed for commercial and light industrial development. The act requires that if we're going to provide assistance to the school district, for example, there would need to be some way of documenting some direct impact that the travel plaza would be having on the school. It's not a residential project. It's not generating more kids for them to educate. And as opposed to, say, the fire district, where we could foreseeably, in the near future, you might find that you've got additional calls out there, which gives us that kind of direct correlation, which then the village would be able to look in an agreement, because it would be in furtherance of the objectives of those projects out there in the TIF district. What we've talked with the school district about is that at some point in the future, we may have an opportunity to look at some additional area over here that is currently unannexed to the village, but could be additional development area that if they proceeded eastward, it might at some point be such that the village could expand this initial TIF area, amend it to make it bigger. And if it included more areas that might even reach to the downtown TIF at some point to be contiguous with it, then it's likely that we would be including some residential areas in order to get from point A to point B. And that's when you begin identifying some direct relationships between the establishment of a TIF district and the types of growth or projects that may occur within that TIF area as having an impact on the school district. By virtue of having a bigger area that might lend itself to more commercial development, and then ultimately some additional residences, those additional residences will probably have kids with them that would be going to the school. It's those kinds of relationships that we're looking for between the TIF plan and the village's authority to be able to provide some assistance to them. But in this plan right now, the way it's configured, it's unlikely that there would be any immediate assistance to the school district. There are other methods and other approaches that once the project has settled out and we know what the costs are and we know what the village's obligations are and what their projects are that they need to cover within this area, if there are some funds that are more discretionary within the TIF fund, there are some other mechanisms that the village could use to be able to provide some assistance to the other taxing bodies. But initially, when the plan is just being established, we're not really able to make that jump, that link just yet. But we've provided the authority in the plan to be able to do it at some point in the future.
So we can't just spend this money wherever we want to.
No.
We have to spend it
No, right
specifically
now it needs to be spent within this five parcel boundary.
wherever the state statute says we're allowed to spend it on.
That's right.
So it's not, in my mind, we're not taking money from the school, because they're still going to get what they're always getting from this land, whether it's developed or not. And if we don't do this, it's not going to get developed. I mean, they'll still get the same amount of money. But anyway, any other public questions? Yes?
Where does the 1 million or whatever that you proposed to tell, where does that come from?
The one for what?
Wasn't it the land? and
Oh, the
stuff?
1.3 million. So that's going to come from the proceeds of the sale of the water and sewer, so we have that in the bank right now. We're gonna purchase the land for them and then be reimbursed from these TIF monies down
Will
the
they
road.
have to pay back for the land, the people that are gonna be there?
It's coming from the TIF funds, so they're paying taxes, that some of that money is going into the TIF funds. So as an incentive for them to come in, we are giving them the land, and we're gonna help pay for the road improvements. You know, we haven't offered incentives before to anybody, and nobody has come to build out there.
But we've never had water there before. So they're just now finally getting water there. It's a prime piece of property that is going to be.
And, you know, we've known we're gonna get water out there for a couple of years, and we've been trying to find people to come out there. They haven't been breaking down the doors to do it, so.
My understanding is that the water and sewer will only be extended out there
Only.
if there is an actual project.
Right.
So if there's not a project, the water isn't there. It's not.
So the first person in gets the best deal. After that, it's gonna be more of a negotiation. So. All right, any other public comments? If not, we will close the public hearing, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn and close the public hearing.
So moved.
It's been moved by trustee Bowden, seconded by trustee Maravka.
Bowden,
Yes.
Marevka?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Ham?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Sorry. You're not in your chair.
I know.